This is the WJW podcast, brought to you by the Washington Jewish Week and Mid-Atlantic Media. Welcome to the WJW podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Trudler. I'm joined today by former ambassador from Israel to the United States, Dr. Michael Oren. Dr. Oren, who served as ambassador from 2009 to 2013, is also a best-selling author and historian. He's served in multiple capacities for the Israel Defense Forces, and he also served in the Israeli Knesset as well. Dr. Michael Oren, thank you for taking the time to chat.
Good to be with you, Aaron. Shalom.
Shalom. So, Israel is currently fighting wars on multiple fronts, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran. You just spent some time in the north serving for the IDF. In light of the various threats that are facing Israel currently from its various neighbors and beyond, what do you think Israel's priorities should be, what its primary focuses should be, as it works to protect the people of the state of Israel?
Well, first of all, we have to try our best to secure the release of the hostages. That is not necessarily a strategic or a military goal. It's a humanitarian and Zionist and Jewish goal at this point. And there's a big question whether it's attainable, whether Hamas will agree to any deal. That's yet to be seen. The greatest strategic threat and our priority must be in the north, not only because 100,000 Israelis have been rendered homeless now for nearly a year, dozens have been killed and wounded, entire cities have been rendered uninhabitable or ghost cities, but also because Hezbollah, backed by Iran, represents a strategic threat to the state of Israel. Hamas was a tactical threat. Hamas couldn't destroy us. It could massacre 1,200 of our citizens and drag 252 into unspeakable captivity in Gaza, but it can't destroy us. Hezbollah, Iran, just Hezbollah alone could fire as many as 6,000 rockets a day at Israel. And that's not including the Shiite militias in Iraq and in Syria, the Houthi rebels in Yemen, and in Hamas and other Islamic radical cells in Judea and Samaria and the West Bank. So multiple wars. So certainly focusing on Hezbollah, which should be our strategic priority.
So you touched on the hostages, which it's on everybody's mind, literally all the time, as well it should be. Unfortunately, we all know about what happened to the 6 hostages whose bodies were recovered after they were murdered just a few weeks ago. There are still approximately 101 hostages that remain in Gaza. The war is still raging on 11 months later, and as you indicated, obviously recovering the hostages and bringing them home safe and sound is got to be a priority. Do you think that the Israeli government is doing enough right now to bring the hostages home, to ensure that the families of the hostages are kept apprised of the situation? I've had a couple family members of hostages on this podcast. We've spoken about a whole host of things, and they have different feelings about different subjects. But the bottom line is, for all of them, the common thread is that their loved ones remain in captivity after such a long period of time. What could we be doing? What should we be doing to bring a resolution to that particular crisis?
Well, I would like to see the Israeli government go the extra mile always. Now, right now, the Biden administration is putting the blame on Hamas, saying the ball's in Hamas court, but a great many Israelis don't believe that. A great many Israelis think that it's Benjamin Netanyahu who's been putting up the major obstacles to a negotiation, to a deal. So actually, we don't know the truth. We don't know. It's based on a lot of leaks and hearsay. We don't know, but the impression is very important, and the impression is crucial for the state of Israel. The state of Israel makes war not on the basis of an executive fiat. The prime minister is not the president of the United States. He's not the commander in chief. And so the government, in order to persuade Israelis to go out to war, to leave their homes, to perhaps not come home to those homes, or send their children or their parents off to war, has to have a tremendous amount of legitimacy behind it. And this government has hemorrhaged legitimacy. It went into the war with a legitimacy deficit, and now it's in severe legitimacy overdraft. And as we're facing this strategic war in the north, and this is a war that will involve all Israelis, because Hezbollah rockets can hit anywhere in Israel with great accuracy, including a lot. That government has to have a tremendous amount of legitimacy and credibility. Right now, this government has neither.
So the events of October 7th obviously changed the state of Israel, changed the world. It changed all of us as Jews, as human beings. In your view, what are the primary lessons from that fateful day? And what could we do, or what should we do? What should the Israeli government do to ensure that such a thing hopefully never happens again?
Well, the primary message is never to underestimate the abject evil of our enemies. Never to assume that they can be bought off. Never assume that they can be in some way induced not to want to massacre us on a grand scale. And it begins with that. And there are many, many technical corrections that have to be made. We have to wean ourselves of over-reliance on technology. That was a big problem on October 7th. We can never afford not to be supremely vigilant at all times. So these are all the lessons. And it's very important that the people who were responsible for October 7th take that responsibility and reach the right conclusion.
So in addition to the war on the battlefield, Israel is also facing battles on multiple fronts in the international community, in the press, whether it's the United Nations, the International Criminal Court. Israel's taking an absolute beating at these global institutions. And on the public relations front, they're not faring that well either, unfortunately. What does Israel have to do, or what should it do, to try and fix these various situations relative to its reputation?
Well, not all of them, or even most of them, Israel can fix. And much of this is animated by anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a lot older than the state of Israel. It's older even than Christianity. And our ability to fight it is limited. We can fight it, we must fight it, but we have to be very realistic about our abilities there. Even today in the United States, the anti-Semitism sweeping over the United States, these anti-Semites don't care about being exposed, don't care about being shamed, they can't be educated. And these were our tools for fighting anti-Semitism for a very long time, by exposing and shaming and educating anti-Semites. It's not going to work. So we can fight. We can fight in the courts, we can fight in the media, we can fight in the classroom. And similarly, Israel can fight in the international arena, and again, in the courts and international institutions. But the most important thing Israel has to do is to recognize that the struggle over Israel's image in the world, Israel's legitimacy in the world, is a matter of national survival. And we can have the best tanks and the best planes in the world, but if we don't have a recognized right to use those planes and tanks, they'll be rendered next to useless. So it's certainly, at the very least, it's about giving time and space for the IDF to defend us. So Israel has to allocate immense funds and resources to waging this fight, and understanding that that fight is every bit as crucial, every bit as fateful to us as the Gaza or Northern Front. On October 8th, created an organization, the Israel Advocacy Group. We act in the mainstream media, the social media, and what's known as track 2 diplomacy. But the Israel Advocacy Group is actually filling a vacuum that's been left by the state of Israel, which has done, in terms of public diplomacy, next to nothing, and doesn't even have a functioning department right now. So we are that department, the Israel Advocacy Group, and working around the clock to defend Israel and to give the IDF that time and space it needs to protect us.
Piggybacking on that a little bit, on some of the things you mentioned about Israel needing the resources and the funds to be able to properly defend itself and fend off these various threats. So as you well know from your time in Washington and your longstanding service to the state of Israel, the U.S. Israel relationship is absolutely critical. Currently in the United States, obviously we have a presidential election coming up. We have members of Congress, some of whom want to either withhold aid to Israel or condition aid to Israel. What do you think of the current rancor and volatility in the American political sphere, and how might that impact the nature of the U.S.-Israel relationship, which is so vital?
Well, Israel must always strive to maintain bipartisan support. Not all Israelis believe that anymore, but I certainly do. I think that bipartisan support for Israel is a strategic national interest for the country. It's not always attainable. There are currents and trends occurring in the United States that have no bearing on the state of Israel directly, whether it be intersectionality or critical race theory or wokeism, but we're on the receiving end of all of these, and our ability to impact them is limited. We could, withdraw from Judea and Samaria tomorrow, create a Palestinian state there, and then redivide Jerusalem, give up Gaza, and still there'd be people out calling for, from the river to the sea, or calling for a global intifada. There's a limit to what Israel can do to impact this. What we can do is, again, strive to maintain bipartisan support. Do not, in any case, in any event, despair or give up on our true friends in the Democratic Party, and even friends among the progressives. And at the same time, we also should seek independence in crucial areas of munition production. We should not be dependent on any outside source, not the United States or any other country, for tank and artillery ammunition, which is running very, very low right now.
Dr. Oren, you touched on anti-Semitism a little bit, and as we all unfortunately are aware of these days, it's rising at a very frightening pace, whether it be in different communities, on city streets, on college campuses. And I think a lot of people are kind of conflating what's happening with some anti-Israel animus, and it all kind of gets mixed together. And we see from some of these pro-Palestinian encampments at college campuses how that manifests itself. As someone who kind of served as that bridge on the diplomatic level between Israel and the United States, and has a very keen understanding of both cultures and both worlds, what do you make of the current situation, and what do we need to do to try and maybe not eliminate anti-Semitism, as you alluded to? It's been around longer than the state of Israel, but at least try and curb it to a certain extent to make it more manageable, and to ensure that people can feel safe in their communities, in their synagogues, and in their schools.
Well, I have a rather cynical view, and that is that this is not a new phenomenon. I think that the world that we living in now would be very familiar to our great-grandparents. They lived in a world in which hatred of Jews was the norm, and I think we've returned to the norm. It's not that people woke up and decided to be anti-Semitic today. They were anti-Semitic, but it was considered unsavory and socially unacceptable, and it no longer is. And again, the model we used to use of exposing and shaming anti-Semitism has limited efficacy today, because anti-Semites are not ashamed. They don't mind being exposed. So we can, though, fight back. And I said before, in the Churchillian sense, we can fight back in the classroom. We can fight back in the media. We can fight back in the courtroom. We can certainly fight back on the legislature. And campuses that aren't, for example, clamping down on anti-Semites, making Jewish students feel safe, they shouldn't receive state or federal funding. And yes, their presidents could be dismissed and should be dismissed. Our biggest problem is the faculties, which can't be really transformed because of the tenure system. The faculties are fomenting some of this. And keep it in mind, it's only on a certain number of campuses, about 60 campuses out of 7,000 campuses in the United States. And the vast majority of American students think that the protesters should actually be punished. Not only do they not agree with them, they think they should be punished. So keep it in perspective. For those students on campuses, we have to work as a community to ensure that they feel safe, that anybody who threatens them, who disparages them for their religion, for their beliefs, will pay a price. Will pay a price, and will not be condoned anymore. I think there's going to be a lot of success in the future. I've also suggested one of the ways that we get around the faculty problem, particularly the Faculty of Middle Eastern Studies, is that we create our own faculties in our own department. A good example would be Georgetown University. I was a visiting professor there. The Middle East department at Georgetown is utterly toxic in terms of Israel, and always has been. So at Georgetown, they simply created a department of Jewish civilization that teaches Israel. So you don't have to be in that department to study Israel or study Jewish studies. And what you do in the classic American fashion, you end run our enemy.
You're scheduled to speak to several groups in forums facilitated by the Jewish National Fund in the coming weeks. In your meetings with American Jewish community leaders, what sort of messages do you hope to be able to convey during these very challenging times?
Well, the first message is to stay with us. The American Jewish community has, since October 7th, exhibited just extraordinary voluntarism, philanthropy, generosity toward the state of Israel. And the Israelis are deeply, deeply appreciative. They're very much aware of it, keenly. Right now, we also need you to give us unity. That some of the biggest threats facing Israel today are not external, they're internal. And the breakdown of that unity that we enjoyed throughout the first few months of the war, now with protests, for and against the government, an immense breakdown of trust and credibility within Israel. We really need the American Jewish community to embrace us, to give us strength, and it's a crucial moment. What I say to every audience that I meet with here, that this is a moment where Jewish history is calling upon us to fulfill a role. Not every generation has that responsibility. Not every generation has that privilege, and it's definitely a privilege to be a Jew today, to stand up and defend our people and our state.
One final question, if I may. You've done a lot over the course of your career, all of it for the betterment of the state of Israel in different ways. Like I mentioned at the outset, you've written books, but again, they're focusing on the Six-Day War and different issues relating to Israel. You served in the Knesset. You talked about the need to advocate for Israel on the global stage. What's next for Dr. Michael Oren?
Well, let's say we're working intensely hard with the Israel Advocacy Group in every way. Next week, I am bringing in my second delegation of displaced Northerners. We had a delegation of uprooted Northerners that came to Washington in early June, met with both houses of Congress, both parties, went to the White House and briefed the president's security team. And we're going to do it again next week. And the purpose is to raise awareness in the United States about the situation up north. And that is what I'm focused on right now. But my whole life has been about service to Israel and the Jewish people, and I will continue doing just that, particularly at this very pivotal, fateful moment in our history.
Hey, Dr. Michael Oren, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron. Good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.